All right, we're going to jump. Nintendo Switch. So, this has been interesting. We've had leaks kind of appear on Reddit from a Chinese production line. Again, take a lot of this with a grain of salt because we are getting close to the announcement of Switch 2. So, we are going to start hear rumors and fake leaks. But this seems somewhat compelling. They showed off the system in just kind of some of these high-end renders. From what I can see, the screen is much larger, I think sporting an 8-inch screen with a USB-C port at the top and at the bottom, which is fantastic. So when you're charging the system, you can actually put the cable in on the top as opposed to the bottom. Updated Joy-Cons, which seem to have like magnets appearing on the sides, so it won't kind of require that railing system that's there with the current Switch. From a power perspective, again, according to these rumored leaks, expected to be around 12 gig of RAM and a 250 odd gig SSD running to HDMI 2.1. So all that mumbo jumbo, you can read that online. It's got 2 cooling fans and all that fun stuff. But basically, from a power perspective, it's projected to be somewhere between the PS4 Pro and the Series S, which I think is the ideal sweet spot for what the Switch is trying to achieve. Again, it isn't really going after that high-end console market. It isn't also going after that high-end, what is now the high-end handheld market with things like Steam Deck and all the others. So this will be really interesting to see, right? So again, Nintendo have always been on an island of their own, but, again, selling through nearly 145 million units, the Switch has proved that the dedicated handheld market is a winning formula, right? So, since its launch, we've seen many competitors enter the ring, right? Most of them with their own unique selling points, whether that's cloud, gaming on the go, PC gaming on the go, hardware like the Steam Deck, ROG Ally, Logitech G Cloud are quickly becoming staples in some people's homes. And both Sony and Microsoft are set to compete in this space with both the rumored developing of new hardware. Can these rumored devices succeed with Nintendo's eyes set on the announcement of Switch in the coming months? So this is all really interesting stuff. I think that my personal take on handhelds has always been, I've liked them enough, but never really ever spent, besides Vita, a lot of time with them. And that is primarily because I like to play my games on a couch. I don't often take my games with me on the go. And my OCD nature only likes to buy things for one thing. And I hated the idea of having separate kind of library of games. I like to be able to just go to one thing. That's why I've always been primarily a console PlayStation player. Isn't because I'm a fanboy or anything like that. It's more along the lines of I like to pick up the game on the shelf and have the one thing that runs it all, right? Of course, we don't have PS3, PS2 backwards compatibility 100%. Well, we've got PS1, 2 emulators running on console now, but we don't have native. And PS3 is obviously its own thing. In a realistic world with PS6, hopefully, please God, we get backwards compatibility fully. I like the idea of I can just pick up that one thing and I've got the one machine to play it. All my cases look the same. It's an OCD thing. But I do appreciate handheld gaming, and it's clear that it's coming back in a meaningful way. I think where others have failed, where Nintendo succeeded, which is funny because the things that made them fail, Nintendo also succeeded at, was having originally, the Game Boy and GameCube split. Different games, different, discs and chips to put into your Game Boy, like a different library of games. They proved that worked. PSP is an interesting thing because it was purchased a lot because it was easily to be hacked. So who knows if it would have hit the 80 million odd console sales that it did, but regardless, it sold through that. I've much preferred the approach of the current iterations of handheld. And what I mean by that is the Switch, regardless of if it's docked or onto the TV, obviously it's the one thing, same library of games, I can get into that. And I've got a Switch, and that's what I use it for. Mostly exclusives, mostly on TV, but I like the idea if I do want to take it on the go, like I've got this flight to Japan coming up, I can take the games, it all works. As opposed to like Vita, where I had a separate library of games, and some Vita games can't be plugged into a console and played and things like that. I really don't like that. So I really do hope, I know I'm jumping around in a million different things, but I really do hope if we do get a PlayStation and Xbox handheld, which I think we will get, that it isn't. It's Xbox. I'm not so much worried about it because I think they know what they've got. But PlayStation don't try to do what they did with the Vita. It's like, I need you to work on a VR game. I need you to work on a Vita game, or whatever they want to call it, handheld game. I don't think they will do that. I think it will kind of launch, if it does launch alongside PS6, maybe it is a Series S-ified PS6 on the go, because and perhaps without some of the parity stuff that's held Series S back this generation. But that's a different, compelling offer to a weaker piece of hardware, right? The nature of it being a handheld comes with the fact that it's a smaller form factor, smaller screen. It's not needing to do as much as like the expectation laid upon the Series S, right? Where it's like, no, this was sold as a cheaper way into this gen that can handle everything that this gen has to offer. Well, that's been debatable. But if it's a handheld and it can be shrunk down and the games don't need to run as flawlessly from a resolution perspective because the screen's much smaller, then I think people will adopt it. So I'm actually super pumped to see if we do get what the Switch 2 ends up looking like and what we get out of PlayStation and Xbox. I can even see myself buying all three, right, for the first time, in terms of having the Switch 2, right? I've got the Switch, I've got a whole bunch of games for it, backwards compatible, let's go. I can see myself buying the Xbox handheld if I want something that I could probably use as my on-the-go piece of tech. Just have Game Pass loaded in and just use that on the go to play Game Pass games. I would love for that to be docked to the TV as well, as a backup. The PlayStation handheld, if it's a shared library, again, very much could see that being beneficial to me. The only downside of that is I primarily buy physical, so it would be interesting to see how that will work between the two, where with Xbox, I'd be using Game Pass, and obviously that's all digital. So if anything, the rumored Xbox handheld is more compelling to me than a PlayStation handheld, if that makes sense. So I think there's, it's a really exciting place to be. Nintendo are going to fit themselves perfectly at the lower end of the power scale, but obviously it's a Nintendo product with all the IP and the fanfare that comes with that, so it's going to sell incredibly well. And then you can have PlayStation and Xbox kind of on the higher end, competing with the likes of like a Steam Deck. And then you've got your streaming only handhelds, right? The ROG Ally and Logitech G Cloud and all those different things, doing its own thing. And then you've also got PlayStation Portal in the mix, which is selling reasonably well for an accessory. I've got mine, and I would say I've definitely dialed back on the usage because I've been playing larger games in like Black Myth Wukong and things like that. But I've played a few worlds in Astrobot on Portal last week, and it runs perfectly fine. So I think it ebbs and flows in terms of usage, and I only play, again, I don't really take my games out. So if I'm not playing on the TV and I'm playing in bed, Portal is perfect. So, again, it's a use case thing. So it's all really exciting. I think like everyone's kind of come to this point where it's like, let's just get games in gamers' hands. You want to play on PC, play on PC. If you want to play Indiana Jones on PlayStation, whatever, play it on PlayStation. If you want to play Lego Horizon on Switch, play it on Lego Horizon and Switch. If you want to play it on your TV, if you want to play it on your couch, you want to play it in your bed, go for it. They're all taking different approaches to that. Some are more aggressive than others. Some are more reserved than others. Nintendo will only launch their stuff on Nintendo hardware. Sony's become a lot more flexible than they were even 5 years ago in terms of launching games closer to launch on PC, games as a service online on PC, and now with Lego Horizon setting a precedent to some of their games coming to Switch. Perhaps the ultimate goal, again, we've been navigating this conversation flawlessly. It's just been all over the place. Perhaps Sony's ultimate goal here is, now that, and this is going to sound fanboy-y, just hold on, let me explain. Perhaps now that they themselves feel that Xbox is out of the race in terms of being a console competitor. 2 generations in a row, they've basically sold half the amount of consoles as the PlayStation. From an optics perspective, PlayStation is the dominant brand. Now that's going to be elevated even more on the basis that Xbox games will be coming and have been coming to PlayStation and will continue to be coming to PlayStation. So I guess the more that happens, the less Sony will even see Microsoft as a competitor. The more flexible Sony, I think, will then in turn become. So if we ever get to a world where Xbox do create hardware, focus that on Game Pass, and release their games day and date on everything, including Switch and PlayStation, I think that will then elevate Sony's chances of bringing games to multiple systems quicker. Now, I don't think, knowing Sony and how bitter that company can be in terms of like, we could release Helldivers on Xbox, but what for? Let them starve and let's see if we can get some of their players across. I think what that will ultimately mean, like I said, Xbox games everywhere, they have their dedicated hardware, Game Pass. That will mean Sony will see them not as a competitor in the traditional sense, but then also going, okay, the console market now is really just us and Nintendo. Now we know Nintendo players, the hardcore, aren't coming across to us, but we also know there is a large component of people who have a Nintendo and have a PlayStation or an Xbox, but in this circumstance, it's just PlayStation. So there really isn't going to be any cannibalization of like releasing games on there because the audience is different. It's generally the younger audience. And I'm not saying they will launch the next God of War on there. But if they've got these games that are multiplayer, that are Lego Horizon like, Astrobot like, maybe not Astrobot, but Ratchet and Clank, that kind of, subsection of games, what is the harm on getting people on Nintendo hooked on that? Because games sell really well on Nintendo, right? And if you've got an audience that grows up on Ratchet and Clank on Nintendo Switch 2 or 3 or whatever, that fall in love with that series, fall in love with things, get older, and then, get to a point where it's like, I really love Ratchet and Clank, but I could play it on PlayStation where it's going to look, run better. Maybe I'll buy a PlayStation 2. So it actually works in their favor. Utilize Nintendo's younger audience and their hardcore audience who buy things. You launch Ratchet and Clank on Switch, it's selling more than 2 million units that it sold on PS5. It's just fact. So I don't think Sony necessarily are rushing to that outcome, but I think the more Microsoft make that reality a reality of we're not really seeing you guys as a competitor, you're launching all your games everywhere, including on our system, the quicker Sony will then go, right, it's just us and Nintendo. Let's utilize Nintendo. And, hopefully, as those gamers grow up and mature, they love the series that are over there and then become a bit more aware of who makes them. Hold on, these are PlayStation games. I can get them running better and playing better on PlayStation. And maybe they have a PlayStation and a Switch. So, again, this has been a really interesting show. We've just kind of covered what feels like a million different topics. I was also going to discuss the Horizon Zero Dawn remastered that's been rated, but look, I don't have the mental capacity to do that today. So perhaps Sean will step in at some point whilst I'm away. Again, I'll be gone in Japan, leaving on the 1st of October for 3 weeks. So really appreciate everybody's time here today. It has been a Josh solo podcast. I am your host and only host here today, Joshua LaRosa. Sean, we wish you well. We wish your power would come back on. Again, you can follow us on YouTube at Busy Playing Something and find us on Twitter at Busy_Playing. Find me, Joshua LaRosa, at Joshua LaRosa on Twitter, at Holly DePrawn. For Sean, again, Australian independent podcast launching each fortnight, 9 a.m. Australian Eastern Standard Times every second Thursday. It's been a pleasure. Stay healthy, stay sexy, and I don't know. What do we want to say? Just ease up on the online discourse. If you're watching this and you're typing it, if your hands are on that keyboard right now, saying this guy's the biggest fanboy douchebag ever, just chill. What would your mother think if you were talking to someone like that? I don't know. Anyway, I am no fanboy, right? Oh jeez, this thing weighs a ton. I am no fanboy. Goodbye. Good night. See you next time.